Hello everyone, welcome into MLS Digest. I'm Camille, your host, bringing you 15 and 15, a weekly recap series covering the most recent match week of MLS action. And we just had week 3 wrap up this past weekend, and I'll be bringing you everything you may have missed and need to know and all the top storylines from this weekend's past 15 matches. But before we get into that, please make sure to like this video down below and consider subscribing to the channel if you're interested in more weekly regular MLS content like this. The first game of the weekend was unfortunately a snooze fest, a 0-0 between the Crew and the Dynamo, two ball dominant teams, and the Crew being at home took a little bit more of the initiative and had more possession, but really limited chance between both teams. The Crew had this game sandwiched between their two legs of the Champions Cup round of 16 against LAFC, in which they're down 3-0 after the first leg at LAFC, and so they also didn't have and don't have the depth to rotate all that much between these types of matches. And so you had a bit of a tired Crew side against the Dynamo side that was normally rested but is just starving for chance creation, don't really have too many talented attacking options up top, and the Crew probably should have made the difference. This could have been like a 1-0, but this was one of those games where you could see that the Crew were missing those star players such as Cucho when they come in face to face with some, frustrating defensive setups. Some half chances with a little bit more quality could have made the difference, but definitely the better result for the Dynamo, their first point of the season. The second game of the weekend between the Sounders and LAFC was one that I saw being more towards something like that Crew Dynamo one, and a bit of an ugly game, very scrappy, lower scoring, and like something around like a 0-0, 1-1 tie due to the rotation, because both these teams are rotating for and did rotate for Champions Cup, since both have very real shots at getting to the quarterfinals in their respective ties. LAFC up 3-0 against the Crew going into that second leg, and then Sounders tied 0-0 going to Cruz Azul for the second leg. But so much for trying to predict this league sometimes. 5-2 to the Sounders at home. Clearly the much better depth between them and LAFC. LAFC's front line of Yeboah, Giroud, and Ordaz really was not, going to threaten too much. Their one goal before half was off a very poorly dealt with corner, I believe, from the Sounders. And then after it was 1-1 at half, they just completely blew the doors off LAFC. JMorris, with the goal, becomes the all-time leading scorer in Sounders history. Next up, we had Atlanta United hosting the Red Bulls, and unfortunately another 0-0 result, but this was the last one of the slate. I promise you, we know the Red Bulls like to make it tough for teams. Their defensive structure is very well organized, but Atlanta certainly had its chances in the first half especially. But we've seen back-to-back weeks now where they've, well, of course, been shut out, but just it's not for lack of chances at the very least. They've had some chances. The front line that they spent so much money on has seemed a little disjointed when things haven't been so free-flowing. But regardless, they could have put this, built a lead early, but Coronel as well stood on his head, so credit to him. He has those games sometimes in against some very, very top attacks. And this game wasn't really played in transition all that much either. The Red Bulls couldn't catch Atlanta out on the break on the other side of things. And Choupo-Moting, 3 games now without scoring. Lewis Morgan out for a couple of weeks. We saw Julian Hollinstead in that true 9 role with Choupo-Moting out on the left-hand side a little bit. So not his true role, but still the pressure is building and building to score his first MLS goal. And on the other side of things, still need to see more from Moranchuk at that 10 role, your DP10. He still really hasn't stood out to me in many games since coming to Atlanta down the second half of last season. Cincinnati handled business against Toronto 2-0 at home. It's now 2 clean sheets and 2 wins in its 2 home games of the MLS season. This game was sandwiched in between its Champions Cup tie against Tigres. It's 1-1 heading into the second leg at Tigres, so much to play for in this midweek for Cincy as well. But Evander was rested as part of a little bit of rotation for Cincy in this game. He picked up some sort of back injury in that first leg against Tigres, but came off the bench in this one. Should be good to go for that second leg. And eventually Danke comes through, converting the penalty kick attempt, and then after a couple of disallowed goals, one for Kubo, he finally gets his to put things away. And Toronto, it's more of the same, very toothless in attack, and just 1 point through the first 3 games of the season. DC United remains undefeated through 3 games, 2 ties to start the season, and finally its first win against Kansas City. Eric Tommy opened the scoring in the second half, but then DC United earned a penalty. Benteke put that one away, and then Kajima minutes later with a beautiful off-ball run to loft a header past Pulskamp. And honestly, DC has been a bit of a surprise to start the season. Obviously not the three most amazing teams that they've played so far, Toronto, Chicago, and Kansas City, but they are picking up points in every match at the very least, and there has been a penalty 2 for and 1 against them. There's been one penalty in all of their 3 games so far this season, so that's something, a bit of a weird stat there so far. But for Kansas City, only half XG created against this DC side that was basically top 5 in both expected goals created and allowed through the first 2 weeks is just criminal. Kansas City still pointless. 3 losses in a row to start the MLS season, and in this one, a loss in which they were leading. Philly made it 3 wins in 3 with a 2-0 win on the road against the Revs, and Ty Baribo with the winning goal, the first of 2 goals in this one, made it 6 goals for him in the first 3 matches of the season. That ties the MLS record for the most goals in the first 3 matches of a season. And this Union attack in general is just in such hot form to start the season under Bradley Carnell. And Lukic as well, the midfielder, signing with a banger goal off the left post deep into stoppage time to kill things off. But from the Revs' perspective, it's a pathetic start to 2025. 3 games to start the season without scoring, 2 of those being at home. And I don't see where the blame can go besides Caleb Porter, the coach. He had a terrible first year last season, got his guys in the transfer windows, assembled his team or whatever you want to call it. And a lot of these attacking players that I think are very talented and have potential are not being utilized correctly. And you have to score goals in this league, or any league for that matter. And the schedule does not get much easier for New England. So if his seat isn't already blazing hot, then I have no idea what is going on in New England, because they have to turn around somehow, but I'm not sure that Caleb Porter is the guy to do it. NYCFC gets its first win of the season in its home opener, 2-1 against Orlando City. And this was a bit more of an open game than I expected, considering NYCFC's kind of more narrow pitch that on the baseball field pitch that it plays on. But yeah, a 2-1 win for NYCFC. Martinez and Wolf scoring after Muriel made it 1-1 late on in the game. And I thought Muriel starting in that 9 spot actually for once or a few times since he joined Orlando showed some actual good flashes, obviously including the goal, but the build-up and the link-up play he had to continue, putting in that effort before the goal, and some other moments in that game. But it can't go without saying that Gallese, Orlando's goalkeeper, had an absolute stinker of a game. Hard not to blame at least one, if not both, of those goals on him just not doing enough in terms of, pairing the ball out enough and not letting it spill to another attacker, and just kind of misjudged, especially on that second goal. So maybe not the most deserved win, because there were even chances across this game, but NYCFC just always finds a way, I feel like, most of the time in their in that home field advantage they have in Yankee Stadium or Citi Field, whichever one it was. The Rapids continued their unbeaten start to the season, picking up their first win now, though, after 2 draws to open the season. Austin, it now makes it 2 losses in a row for them. And the decider in this one was early. Navarro chipping Stuver after being played through by Mihailovic after a bit of a turnover in the midfield. And then from there, probably Austin with the better chances, including 2 PKs that were called back after VAR reviews, which I think both were good calls in terms of overturning those. But for Austin, I just feel like it's the same things are creeping up from last season, despite the new coach, despite these new attacking signings. Is just a little bit too predictable in terms of the ball movement, and the tempo is not there. Uzuni finally got his first start, still, I guess, getting his legs under him, but at the same time, the excuses have to start running out at some point, because Estevez, to me, it seems like he's flipping the formation and changing things week by week, and this team is not really getting a true sense of what it is or what it can be. And so I guess it's still a work in progress. Maybe we shouldn't have expected too much from this Austin team, but we'll see what the manager decides to do, in already a crucial next month to start this season. The Fire picked up its first win of the season, turning things around on the road in Frisco, retaining the Brimstone Cup with 3 goals from the 80th minute onwards to come back against Dallas. And wow, what a turnaround performance in some, very wet weather for Chicago after a terrible collapse of its own against DC United last week. I thought the subs for the Fire made a huge difference, including, of course, Barroso, the right back from Portugal, finally making his debut off the bench and scored what was eventually the game-winning goal, rebounding off a very well-struck Kuiper shot on the right side, and had a bit of a free goal, but not the easiest shot considering the conditions there. But for the Fire on the flip side, dealing with another key injury going forward with Kellen Acosta going down, with an already super thin midfield dealing with injuries and having to call up so many, kids from the Fire 2 or Academy squads to help deal with it. And Greg Berhalter still has not fielded a actual first choice full starting 11. Nashville finally picked up its first win of the season against the Timbers, but it wasn't without more and more drama, looking for as well its first goal of the season. After 2 missed penalties inside 20 minutes, the Timbers were basically gifting them the lead and the win early on, but it was Pantemis with 2 amazing saves, both to his right on Mukhtar and then Surge, who took the second one. But then eventually they got the lead right before halftime and then padded to it in the second half. Could have been much more than this, of course, considering those penalties and how dominant they were in possession. But on the flip side, this Timbers back line is just so mistake prone, and João Ortiz, one of their kind of holding mids that they signed as well, has not had a good start to the season as well. This Timbers team is just full of, it just seems very disjointed. The attack also isn't very healthy to start the season, and so despite Nashville's scoring struggles, not hard to see this one coming for a Timbers team on the road. San Diego FC remains atop the Western Conference standings after a 3-1 win on the road at RSL. They went down early to RSL. It was 1-0 in the 17th minute to Pio. The prospect from the Australian League finally gets off the mark for RSL, so could be another option in terms of that frontline number 9 type of player for RSL, who is really lacking in terms of those killers. But then San Diego turned it around right before I've tied it. And then after missed chances from both sides in a very even game, especially 2 terribly missed chances, one from Marchuk and one from Gonçalves. Basically, each had one-on-one chances with the keeper and put it just wide of the post. San Diego does it in stoppage time again. Dreyer with another late winner to make it 2-1. And then to make it even worse, Ingvartsen gets his first of the season to down RSL. That's now 7 points in the first 2 games for San Diego, without Chucky Lozano still getting it done and unbeaten in 3 games to start its inaugural season. The Whitecaps are only the second team outside of the Union to start the season. 3 wins in 3 games. They took care of Montreal, which is starting the season on a terribly long road trip. This was their 3rd away game in a row to start the season. They'll have another one in week 4, but the Whitecaps had this game sandwiched in between their Champions Cup tie against Monterrey, in which it's tied 1-1. They're down on the away goal going into that second leg on the road, but still alive in that one. And a bit of, not full strength here for Vancouver, but got a terribly, ugly goal for that first one in the first half. Montreal just failing to clear its lines and just clear the ball. And then a bit more of the Vancouver we've come to know in the past handful of seasons, getting on the break, and Johnson getting his first goal for the Whitecaps to kill things off. And Montreal so far has not offered much bite in the last 2 weeks, getting blanked after its week 1, tight loss to Atlanta. Minnesota went on the road to the West Coast to San Jose and in a sense stole all 3 points, getting the early-ish goal from Yeboah in the 33rd minute, but the whole game setting up in with that back 5, really absorbing so much pressure and getting out on the break when they could. San Jose had a lot of the ball, but they really could not create dangerous crosses in or kind of play through the middle whatsoever because of Minnesota's really tight midfield. And with Hernan Lopez out, you saw Pellegrino playing in that 10 role in a sense, but really most of the threat came from the wide play and some in-swinging balls from Christian Espinoza, their main chance creator, of course. And they had a couple late chances on some other set pieces and corner kicks, but I was shocked that this game ended 1-0 or with just that one goal, considering the last half an hour of that game. San Jose was putting so much pressure on Minnesota. Minnesota had a handful of really good counterattacking opportunities, but they just looked gassed and just could not connect to find that killer goal to end things. And that's what made it so tense late in this match. But Minnesota escaped with all 3 points. Sunday's first primetime match in the afternoon was Miami hosting Charlotte. Both these teams coming off really big wins in week 2. But Miami survived despite going down to 10 men for a 1-0 win. Ustari, the goalkeeper, got a red card right before the first half ended. Maybe a bit of a harsh call, but then eventually, right after halftime, a minute into the second half, Allende continues his hot form to the season and got what was eventually the winning goal. And that red card basically almost doomed Charlotte because it went against everything that their attack is good at in terms of playing in transition. And when they are faced with these low blocks that Miami had to kind of get into because of going down to 10 men yet again, the second time this season in MLS play, Charlotte's wingers were really abysmal, especially, I mean, Abada, I've kind of been said it even from last season, like that I just don't think he's been that productive of a player. He's really not really shown too many flashes. I don't think he's a championship caliber DP winger. And Zaha as well, they kept trying to force him the ball on the left-hand side, but he was getting double, triple teamed, and then he had to spray the ball back out backwards. And so Charlotte seemed devoid of any ideas. I think in that perspective, they're a bit of a one-trick pony in terms of that attack. If they don't take the lead, then it's really, they show really troubling signs in terms of not really being able to create many chances. And finally, to wrap week 3 up, the Galaxy hosted Sunday Night Soccer for already the second time this season, but it has not been a good look whatsoever for the defending champs so far this season. They're the first defending champs to start the season with 3 losses in a row, and it came at the hands of St. Louis City, which finally picked up its first win of the season after back-to-back 0-0 draws, so still unbeaten as well, and now 3 clean sheets for this team. And Roman Berkey, who stood tall in this one, made a couple of great saves early to deny the Galaxy, who had a couple of good looks to start this one. And then right before the end of the first half, another mistake on a corner kick from Mitrovic, the new starting goalkeeper over McCarthy, which has been the topic of a lot of heated discussion amongst Galaxy fans. And he makes the mistakes on that one, spills it, and Tykert buries it on a rebound. And then in the second half, immediately Hartel gets that second goal, and then late Becker. And that's exactly how we know St. Louis to be, those transition moments. And that link-up play was just absolutely ruthless. And they left no doubt that they would leave LA with all 3 points. And for the Galaxy, they have to move on and focus on the second leg of their Champions Cup tie at home this week against Herediano, where they're down again 1-0 heading into that second leg. So that does it for week 3 of 15 and 15. Be sure to stay posted for CONCACAF Champions Cup action in the midweek. Currently, it's the second legs, like I mentioned, of the round of 16. So a lot of top MLS sides looking to advance further on in that competition. And once most of those games conclude during this midweek, I'll have the week 4 preview for this coming weekend's action out. And in the meantime, enjoy all those midweek matches, and I'll see you guys in the upcoming video.